everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Attendance Bias. I am your host, Brian Weinstein. Today, I am speaking with returning guest Scott Mikita, who previously appeared on this show to talk about Cavern that closed the island tour on April 5th, 1998. But for today's episode, Scott moved from talking about a single song to a full set. And that set is one of the most legendary of Phish's career, Set 2 of December 31st, 2013, otherwise known as the JEMP Truck set. Please forgive hyperbole, but Phish fans can be quite a divisive fan base. What one fan considers to be the greatest performance ever seen, the next fan over may consider the same show to be the band's lowest point ever. It is exceedingly rare for the fan base to agree that a song, a set, or even an entire show is special, but this set hits that mark. Taking us back in time to an era that is long gone, Phish simultaneously celebrated their past, their present, and their future at the end of their 30th year together. They did this through the stage setup, their setlist choices, and the straight narration to the audience. But I don't want to spoil it. Let's join Scott Mikita to talk about the secret security entrance to Madison Square Garden, bringing a pen light to read during a show, and rumors that never happened in 2013 as we dig into the JEMP Truck set from December 31st, 2013 at Madison Square Garden. Scott, thank you for coming back to Attendance Bias. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Brian. Thanks for having me once again. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's going to be wonderful. Scott was last here. I think the episode aired in November to talk about the Cavern from the very end of the island tour on April 5th. And for everyone to go back and listen to it, that would really be in your best interest. But Scott, if you could just remind us, what about that was so special to you before we dig into today's episode about the JEMP Truck set? What was it about that Cavern that got to you and you wanted to talk about last time?
Man, that Cavern was so unique in every sense of the word. Just played at a different speed. It was slowed down. It was funked out. It was just everything for me at the moment. I think, reliving that particular moment and getting to talk about it with you was great. And like you said, if anybody hasn't heard the 4-5-98 Cavern, definitely dig into that soon.
And I was also saying, anyone who hasn't heard that podcast of Scott talking about it, you should listen to that too. But yeah, in that order, listen to the Cavern and then go back to Attendance Bias and check out
definitely do both. Yes.
Yeah, definitely do both. So today we are here to talk about a different show. And really, I've never done this before, I don't think, on Attendance Bias, but a single set of a show. And I'm glad that we decided on this because this set, in my opinion, is the most special set of Phish that I've seen live and in person. I wasn't at Big Cypress, and I could name other sets that might have better music or better jams. But in terms of sentimentality and what it meant to me, I'll say my piece, but I'm excited to hear your piece about it. And that is the JEMP Truck set, which is set 2 of New Year's Eve at Madison Square Garden 2013. And before we get to that, the New Year's run, your perspective on the JEMP Truck set, Scott, let's get to know you a little bit. You've already done a lightning round, so you are going to be the first guest to do a double lightning round. How does that feel? Are you prepared?
Talk about excitement, man. Wow. Awesome.
Yeah. Start at 100 miles per hour and we don't let up.
Attendance Bias lightning round.
So this question was asked last time, but to remind people, what was your first Phish show?
My first show was 12/30/95 at MSG. I wasn't fortunate enough to get tickets for 12/31, but yeah, 12/30/95 Scorcher.
What were your best memories?
I think overall that Harry Hood from that night stands out, but the It's Ice Kung back into It's Ice was freaking wild, man. But very fun night overall, and I love the Garden, and I've continued to go back to the Garden and will continue to go back to the Garden. It's just the best place to see Phish play. So
same here. So what was your most recent show and what did you think of it?
Most recent was Hershey Night 2, 8/11/21. I thought it was, it was great. I only got to do the 3 Deer Creek shows and then the 2 at Hershey. But after leaving Deer Creek, which I thought was a fantastic 3-night run, the first night at Hershey was a little bit of a letdown. Part of it was, we got in late. The weather was crappy. It was raining. There was thunder and lightning, and I was almost certain there was going to be a delay. But the second night, my last show that I did see the second night at Hershey was Smoker. I thought, right out of the gate with You Sexy Thing and the Wombat, and they just kept bringing it back all night. It was a lot of fun.
So lightning round question specific to this episode, a song that they didn't play during the JEMP Truck set that you wish they had.
Yeah, this one was a little tricky because, you could have subbed in really any of the Gamehenge stuff that they didn't play, but I thought placement-wise, McGrupp would have fit real nice somewhere right in the middle, or, maybe the two or three songs into that particular set. But, I didn't end up missing it, I guess. But if, I don't know, being asked that question, McGrupp seems like the one song that I thought would have fit pretty nicely in there.
Right. To be clear, I'm not asking you to complain. That's not.
No, not at all. I apologize. No complaining.
Because I thought of it too. I like to almost answer my own lightning round questions at the same time to put myself in the guest's position. That's why I got rid of a whole bunch of them from previous episodes. And I didn't miss it either, but I thought Destiny Unbound also would have fit pretty nicely in this set.
Okay. I could see that.
Next question. A bucket list venue that you've never been to?
Definitely the Gorge. Number one on the list. It doesn't seem like Phish will be going back to Red Rocks anytime soon, which I also haven't been to. But to see Phish at, it's got to be the Gorge.
What's the Phish show you've been to with the worst weather? I came up with these questions during a snowstorm, by the way.
It would have to be Coventry. That was just an absolute disaster. So bad that, I was one of the ones that listened to the radio when it said to go home, the bunny or whatever, that if you're not already in, you're not going to get in. And I was with a buddy of mine that had a couple kids, like a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, and there was no way we were going to hike 10 miles off the highway and then another 10 miles to the venue. So we called it and listened to what they told us, and we took off. And of course, we ended up missing it, but it was all a weather catastrophe, which led to us not getting in. So,
do you woo at all?
Always during Twist, never during Vultures.
I agree with you.
Wooing I can get down on when the moment's right. I'm not going to be one of those complainers about people wooing and Tweezer, but when the moment's right, you woo.
How many claps in Stash?
3. I felt like originally back in probably 1.0 days, the late 90s, it was more probably of a 3, 4, 5 kind of combo. I feel like I've realized over the years, it's just 3 claps. That's it.
I always thought it was 2. My girlfriend also says 3. Am I wrong?
I don't like to say anybody's right or wrong when it comes to Phish. So, everybody has their own opinion, but I felt like from the original studio recording, it was kind of in time with Phish's beat, which sounded more like 3, 4, 5 to me, but it's just 3 now. For me at least. What
is your most controversial Phish opinion?
I am not a big fan of Halfway to the Moon at all. I actually think that song is, and I don't really have any other songs that I would say I fully dislike. There's some that are okay, but Halfway to the Moon, I can't get into that song no matter what.
What is your favorite post-show snack?
Any kind of meat, beef jerky, hot dog, a hamburger, a sausage.
What is the weirdest thing you've ever seen at a Phish show?
I forget when it was. I think it was fall of 97 or 98, late 1.0, but someone had purchased the Phish book. They were selling them in the venue. Richard Gere's The Phish Book, I believe it is, the author, Richard Gere. But he was reading it throughout the whole first set with like a little mini flashlight. And it's just, big blow up pictures of them on stage. And he had a little mini flashlight and he's reading it along. And I just kept thinking to myself, like 4 songs in and he's still reading the book. Like, just look up. What you're looking at in the book is happening right in front of you right now. Like, I don't know. It was very strange to me.
When was this show played?
The context of today's show. So let's look over the New Year's run in 2013. It was a traditional 28th to the 31st. I attended 3 out of 4 of the shows, and the New Year's Eve run followed an extremely well-regarded fall tour. In my opinion, it was their best up to that point. And show after show, it featured Bliss-style jamming, which is these major keys that build and build. They're really experts at dynamics and getting the crowd into a frenzy, like this kind of ecstatic peak. Did you hit any of those shows on that fall tour?
I hit the Hartford show, and the Hartford show only. That was the what I thought would be the only show I would see in 2013. But I ended up getting the New Year's ticket too. But that Hartford show was like, I don't know, the first set ended and I was like, this is not good.
Really?
The second set was so good. But yeah, I think overall the fall tour of 13 was a big turning point for the band. So
agreed. And then I remember this motif that went throughout 2013 in that everyone was well aware that it was Phish's 30th anniversary. And I remember toward the end of 2012, when they did the golf New Year's show, that there were a lot of rumors being spread about what the 30th anniversary year would bring. Some of the rumors that I remember hearing were like hit and run shows where the band would play small venues from the past. Some that I remember reading about in rumor threads were the Cumberland County Civic Center in Portland or the Nassau Coliseum, where they would announce these shows just 48 hours in advance in places they knew would sell out,
right,
and play them. And I thought that sounded great. It didn't happen, but it's a cool idea.
Right. Interesting nonetheless, but that's kind of how the rumorville goes, right? I remember they were talking about like Hawaii, and they were teasing Wipeout and everything for a while on what was that, 97, 98? Yeah. So same kind of thing.
Yeah, I remember other rumors would be a 10th festival, which would be in the Poconos. Another rumor that I remember would be a really fun late 80s Grateful Dead style tour where the band would only pick like 5 different venues, and each venue would get like 5 or 8 shows at a time, like the Dead used to do with Madison Square Garden and Boston Garden, because none of those came to fruition. None of that happened. And Phish didn't really acknowledge the 30-year anniversary at all throughout the summer or fall. They never mentioned it. So it let the audience, us psychos, invent all these plausible and frankly implausible ways for the band to celebrate it. Nothing was proven or disproven until the dates passed.
Or to not think about it at all. I mean, to be honest with you, I certainly wasn't as involved on, say, Twitter or social media back in late 2013 as I am per se now. So,
yeah.
And I was never a big message board guy or anything like that. So you could have just kind of been not in the know and then been like, oh yeah, it has been 30 years,
Yeah. And I thought it was pretty fun for a band that seems in on all the jokes and fans like me who live for theatrics and references to themselves. It was like waiting for a show that never came. And so this is the 4-night run, just some details, some trivia, where Tom Marshall posted his tweet about Phish playing 4 nights at Madison Square Garden of all originals. And then he said, put that bread in your jar, Piano Man, which I don't know. I know you said you weren't very much into online, but this whole Phish Billy Joel thing, that's what started it.
It's great. And it's great knowing that, like, through this and, some of the pre-gaming for this and getting some of your feedback on it and hearing that, it's the first time I've ever heard that. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I didn't know it originated with this run. So.
And I felt very caught in the middle because I'm a huge Billy Joel fan.
I wouldn't say I'm a huge Billy Joel fan. I mean, plenty of the guy's songs over the years, and a lot of them are good. So.
Trust me, of everyone I've spoken to on this podcast and Phish fans in general, almost no one would say they're a huge Billy Joel fan. So
fair enough.
On the 30th of this run, December 30th, the band put up what would become the overhead lights on the JEMP Truck set. It was under the Jumbotron at Madison Square Garden. If you went online, you could see there's like Zapruder style photographs of what's under the Jumbotron. Everyone noticed it, but no one could tell what it was.
That's really cool. I didn't know that either.
So it's fun looking back in retrospect, but at the time it's like, all right, it's got to be something. Are they going to play on top of the Jumbotron? I remember thinking, and I was off by a little bit. It's just looking at it the wrong way.
I mean, again, my story of getting there is just insane. It was so improbable that I would have been there on New Year's Eve, and then it all just kind of came together, oddly enough.
Is that a story you're willing to tell?
Yeah, at work, I had kind of met the vice president of operations at like MSG, and I don't know, I should know his name because this was a huge deal at the time. My man, one of the managers that worked for me at the time, was very kind of close with him. He had been helping him for a few years, I guess. He introduced him to me and told him, I've known him for a long time, the manager, so he had known that I had never seen Phish on New Year's Eve, but I've always wanted to. And there were, 3 years out of 4 that I saw them on the 30th, and that was the closest I got. And, we were just talking for a little while, and I was telling him, and he was telling me back that like Phish fans are the best. And, they always fill the place. And we just kind of went back and forth for a little while. And it was, one of those maybe like 2-minute conversations. We shook hands and just parted ways and never really thought anything about it. Right. So it's Christmas Eve and I'm at work, and, the day it ended or whatever, and we're leaving. And my buddy, Mike, the manager, was like, by the way, you're going to see Phish on New Year's Eve. And I was like, yeah, I wish, yeah, I really wish that's exactly what I want to do. But yeah, that's not going to happen. And he was like, no, you're going, man. I'm serious. I made it happen. I talked to him, and, you got 4 tickets there. You just got to go there. And he gave me this little piece of paper with instructions on where to go. And my name will be on some clipboard. So I have no tickets, right? I have no tickets in hand. I go down with a buddy of mine, my younger brother, another friend of ours. And we're supposed to go on like the employee entrance and all this wild stuff. And like, it just doesn't seem right. Like there's this tight little sidewalk that goes to the employee entrance, and there's all these security guards. And I'm like, I don't know, man. And we walk in, and they're like, who? I'm like, yeah, I'm Scott Mikita. And they're like, you're Scott Mikita? You come with me right now. And like, Whoa. They grabbed me and my 3 friends. And I mean, quick pat down, and then boom, and like this backdoor elevator. And we literally popped up backstage. And I remember as soon as the door opened, Gordon goes by on a golf cart and like just kind of waves nonchalantly, and I'm like, holy shit, we're backstage right now at MSG. And we got walked out onto the floor. We're all given bracelets, wristbands, and that was it. That's where we were supposed to be. And there were like no words spoken by the people that escorted us there. They were just like waving, like, come on, follow me this way, this way. No idea where I'm going. I don't know if I'm in the rafters. I don't even know how we got in and any of this worked. It was just trust the guy. We're going to do it. It's all going to work out. And it did. And it was incredible, man. Just an incredible night.
Wow. What a story. That's so great. It's
crazy.
And it starts off with a wild goose chase. Just showing up to a guy with a clipboard, nothing in hand, I would be sweating. We walked
by that entrance like 5 times. We just paced back and forth like, I don't know, man. Should we do it? That's what he said. Like, we got to go that way, but I don't know. It just doesn't seem right. Those dudes are big at the door. I think that guy's got a gun. Like, I don't know. We were just kind of having like a breakdown. Like, fuck, we don't even have tickets. What are we doing? This is so stupid. It's not going to work. And it all just did. They were like, Scott Mikita, holy shit. Yeah, come with me right now. And like,
wow.
Amazing, man. Just amazing.
After the first set, during set break, there was a video that played overhead, and it showed Fishman packing up all the gear from all the previous New Year's Eve gags. And I thought that was a great touch. He's like in this warehouse, getting like a hot dog together and a golf cart and all the different knickknacks that are recognizable. And it's almost like a bunch of Easter eggs. You know it only if you know the band's history. And then he puts it in this big box truck, drives them from Burlington to New York City.
Right.
And I didn't know personally what it was building toward, but I was really thrilled when it began to unfold. Like, were you able to see the video from the floor?
Oh yeah, the video was awesome. I mean, right before the video, I don't know if you remember this. At the end of the first set, they actually carried out what looked like a keyboard or a piano, and
Yes.
it was a cake. And they actually cut a few pieces of it out, and we're handing a couple pieces out to maybe like 2 or 3 fans at most, and like somewhere in the front. They were just like handed slices of this keyboard cake that I swore from my vantage view. I mean, I was probably 20 rows back, page side, and it came out kind of mic side is where they put the keyboard down, the keyboard cake. And it looked like a keyboard to me until they cut into it. But I remember thinking in my head, like, oh my God, what are we doing here? Is this like keyboard army going to happen? And then they cut it up and like handed it out, and it was a cake, and it was the big 30th anniversary. And then I think like they walked off stage and it went into the video that you're talking about. And yeah, I watched the whole thing. It was freaking awesome.
The cake, I remember.
Popped up. So.
Yeah, I could see it from where I was. Of course, it did not look like a cake to me, but they posed with it, right? They put the famous Colorado 88 background. I think the picture's from Telluride.
Right.
And they posed walking halfway through with Paige and Trey. And then, yeah, they ate the cake.
That's right. They did have that little pause moment, too. That was very cool. My brother actually tried to go down and get a piece, but you know how the rail riders are. So,
oh, yeah. Back off.
They weren't having this guy coming up trying to get a piece of cake. And that did not work out. So,
you did not wait in line for this cake.
Exactly.
So, I also remember that they being security and MSG started like clearing the floor a little bit, right? They kind of made a like a pathway for the truck.
I didn't notice because that was, behind me more or less. Cause I guess that came out in the middle of the floor. So I was in the middle of the floor and the stage more or less. So I didn't even know that all that clearing or whatever was kind of happening behind me, but
I was straight back. And so it became very clear once the truck came out that the band was going to play a set while on top of the truck. And that's why the lights now were under the Jumbotron. That all clicked all of a sudden. And more than that, they were going to play a set while using their oldest stage setup from those pictures that, from your buddy would know in the Phish book.
Right.
And Paige was sitting on milk crates. They had the old can lights and all of their old gear with hockey sticks as mic stands. And my view of it is that they created a time machine. Basically, they took all of Madison Square Garden back to 1986 or 1987. I thought it was a wonderful concept, and it was executed with almost a minimalist style stagecraft. A lot of their New Year's gags are very, very big.
Correct.
This was pretty simple. Not that it was easy.
There weren't all the theatrics to it. It was just a nice, simple setup, but it had that super old school vibe to it. It was very cool.
Yeah, I loved it. And I thought that this was a gift to the big Phish nerds.
So I hate to kind of like jump in here for another minute or two and tell you something else about this. But
do it. You're the guest.
As it started to happen and I realized that they were, coming up on top of it to play their set, I actually saw another band at MSG a year or two prior. I don't remember exactly if it was 11 or 12, but this band Dispatch, which is a 3-man independent act. They're actually, I think they might still be the only independent unsigned artist to ever sell out MSG. And they sold out so quick for 2 nights that they added a third or whatever. But they actually did the same thing, but where they rolled out their Wimpy, their tour bus or whatever that they used to go around on back in the early days. And they played a whole acoustic set on top of that. So I was just in MSG watching this band do what Phish was just about to do. And I don't know, it was so wild. But, as much as I'd love to say it was the most original thing I've ever seen, it actually wasn't at the time. But it was still, an awesome set. But oddly enough, Dispatch beat them to it with their original tour bus.
So I really thought that it was like a gift. How many times would anyone expect to hear songs like Forbins and Mockingbird, Iculus, Llama, Lizards, Fuck Your Face, all these songs.
A whole set of
in
nothing
one set.
Past Lawn Boy. A whole set of nothing past the album Lawn Boy of like 92. Everything. 92 or earlier. Crazy.
I'm sure that information's out there. I'd like to see what the latest song debuted was that they played. Off the top of my head, I would guess Split Open and Melts.
Right. It would have to be. Because, I mean, Llama came out long before, and Glide was on Picture of Nectar.
So was Llama, yeah.
So, right. Which is weird.
And a lot of the songs aren't on any albums.
Correct. I mean, that's got to be the most special thing about this set is just the age of the songs. I mean, yes, you got a good chunk of Gamehenge in there, but then everything else they played was all old school. It was perfect. It was just so great.
The set starts with Glide, and I jumped right out of my skin. I've said a billion times on this podcast that it's my favorite song, still is. And it sounded pretty different because Fishman had a really old school drum set up. It's like the same kind of drum set that you might buy as a starter set, Sam Goody or Sam Ash or Guitar
It was scaled
Center.
way down, to say the least. It was definitely a scaled down set. So
yeah, for a song that centers very largely on woodblocks and cowbells, there was none to be had. It took me even a few seconds to even calculate that it was Glide, and the crowd cheer about a minute in is inspiring.
Right.
It really is.
they like threw Trey off because there were a couple slip ups early, but they got right into it. Didn't come out that clean, but it got there. And it was great. I mean, I love hearing who doesn't like hearing Glide? So it was awesome. I opened that set.
And I thought that they must have really practiced this pretty hard because especially Fishman, because that muscle memory of being a drummer, he knows where every single part of his drum set is. And now it's, I don't know, 4/5 of it is gone.
Yeah. Well, Fishman's an octopus. So it's, he's just got eight different limbs going at all times. And you can give him just a snare and a bass drum and a hi-hat and he could kill it. So,
and they do. Next up though is Llama, which is a killer. Fishman snare drum page, they're so loud. Have you listened to this recently?
Oh yeah, I have actually, and I think it's an absolutely ripping version. It's full speed ahead. We are not talking slow.
No.
And it was, let's go.
There are parts of it, I'm speaking for myself, but I'm curious what you think, that if you close your eyes and forget they're at MSG, it really sounds like the early 90s. Like it really could be 1991.
That's what I mean by saying it's just ripping. I mean, it sounded like old school Trey, just like going for it. And I don't know that they, typically play at that speed anymore with that song, but I felt it that night. It definitely seemed like a young version.
To follow up, Llama was Colonel Forbin's and Mockingbird, and it was right around here that I realized that the set list was part of the gag.
That was incredible when Forbin started. I just remember the energy being at it. Like, I was looking around at that point, like, are you guys serious right now? This is happening?
That glistened on his brow. His tired feet were buried in the quagmire, and his bloodshot eyes saw all that lay between him and fulfillment of his vow. And he felt his feet wrap around another group and pull his body upwards to a sea green mossy boulder, and he dragged his weary shit ass up the mountain.
It was incredible. And then obviously Mockingbird is always one of the harder songs in the whole, I think, in the whole arsenal for Trey to play. And after, again, another maybe little minor tweak at the beginning of it, it rebounded nicely. And the story, and that's what I love about a song like that, is you're going to get a little Trey story. It might not be long anymore like it used to be and all elaborate, but you're going to get a little bit of story time involved. So fun.
Well, yeah, I listened to the set today, and Mockingbird gets pretty brutal for people who really value.
I was being nice.
No, I know you were. But it does get pretty bad for Trey. But as a teacher, I always have to look on the positive side of things. I always look for compliments for my students. And so my compliment that came from this, finding the positive in the botched guitar part of Mockingbird, is that the rest of the band doesn't stop. They don't slow down. They don't cut out. They just keep playing as if Trey is nailing it in 1992. And to me, that speaks to the trust that they have in one another.
I was just going to say, I think it was more of a faith in Trey that he'll come back around and he'll get there at some point. Well, you just keep playing and he'll find it. And it worked. I mean, it took a minute, or not a whole minute, but it took a little bit. And then it got there.
And it's really touching to not to get too cheesy, but it is. I've been in bands when someone screws up, whether it's the singer and screws up a lyric or the guitarist butchers a solo, whatever, what have you. The other members of the band typically stop and look at that player.
Right. A full stop. Like, what are you doing, man?
Yeah. And that wasn't even close here. They just kept it going. Do you remember around at what point you realized what was going on with the set list, that it wasn't just that they were playing a set on their old gear, but they were also playing as though it were 1991?
I would have to think through the story of Mockingbird, but once you got out of, all right, so we start Glide, Llama, Forbin, Mockingbird, and then Fuck Your Face happens. Yeah. I think it was right at that moment, right? Because that would probably be like the middle point of the set, mm-hmm. I guess.
Yeah. And
it was like, all right, well, we're halfway through and this is all old school shit and I love it. Let's stay here. This has to be what's going on at some point. You just realize like this is special. I mean, you knew it was special by the setup regardless, but they really took special to the next level with what they played. And this is, another example of it just being so perfect that it was all old school.
Yeah, agreed. I remember there was one point, it was during a pause. It might've been between Mockingbird and Fuck Your Face, where I was feeling pretty good and I started shouting, as loud as I could to the people around us, this is a gift. We should appreciate this. We should all appreciate this. So if you were near me, I apologize. But
probably didn't hear you, but at the same point, I was probably saying a lot of similar things. I know when it gets me, the hat comes off and I just don't care that my bald head is exposed to everybody. And I am looking around like, are you guys hearing this? Are you seeing this? Like, do you understand what's happening right now?
We sound just like each other. How happy am I? Right? I have as big a smile now as I did then. And then they followed "Fuck Your Face" up with Reba, which is a classic. It's never really been out of the rotation. And I thought
Reba.
It is a really good Reba.
Good Reba, man. Yeah. I like this Reba a lot. I've gone back to it a few times over the years since, and it's a good Reba.
Me too. It's either this or later Split Open and Melt, I would say, for the two best jams of this set. But this set isn't even really about jams, even though they're able to lift it up this way. I thought it was fun how the first half of the set were like weird 5 to 6 minute standalone songs, but the second half of the second set have the two big jams in it. It's like the mirror of the band's career.
Yeah, for the most part, totally.
And then after that is, I mean, this is the cherry. This is really, there's no walking out after this. It's Iculus. The only one Iculus, played at MSG.
This Iculus is so incredible. And Trey looking around and saying, you know, I can tell a lot of you haven't read the book. And, you know, then it's just like, read the fucking book. And I mean, that the energy was the best part, I thought, of this whole set. The energy surrounding you and in the whole building, everybody was getting into it. Everybody that hadn't read the book at that moment wanted to know what the fuck the book was. And everybody else that had read the book was like, fuck yeah. You know, it was just like one of those fucking great moments, man, that, yeah, you'll never forget. Just, it was an all-timer for sure.
And I wonder how much Trey's tone, because 3.0 versions of Iculus seem to be, the only word I could think of is punitive. It's like Trey's pissed off at people. He's always criticizing the crowd. Like in 2009 in Hartford.
Yeah, right. I was there.
Nobody reads anymore. You know, pick up a fucking book, that whole thing. Exactly. And this is, some of you aren't getting the message, you know, read the book. And I'm like, I wonder how much is real and how much is just Trey being the goofball that he is. I have a feeling it's like, I don't know, 80-20, Trey being a goofball, 20% really a little frustrated with the fan base.
He made the Iculus very fun with his antics. Nonetheless, but it was awesome.
To give you the fucking message. Now, if we're going to keep blaring at you and you're not going to get it, I've got to make one suggestion. If you can't get it from us, there is a book that you can all read. And in that book, you'll get the message. That's how we got it in the first place. Go find this book at Barnes and Nobles. But I really want you, before you leave here tonight and move into the next 30 years, to take my advice after all this time and read the fucking book! Okay.
And afterward, he almost apologizes. He says, in all seriousness, we used to play that song every Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday at Nectar's, and I never thought we'd be playing at Madison Square Garden.
Right.
But I like that Paige said, I did.
yeah. He asks Paige, he like defers to Paige. Paige, did you think? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Follow up Iculus with lizards. I mean, this is the stuff dreams are made of.
It just kept getting better. It was amazing. Like, all right, how are they going to top this after every song ends? And they just kept doing it. It was great.
And to close the whole thing was Split Open and Melt, which I sometimes forget how old it is.
Right.
You know, because when I was getting into Phish, I listened to a lot of 1994 and 93. And that was when, in my opinion, Split Open and Melt was really at its big, energetic, weird peak. And I'm sure there's arguments, otherwise. To me, Split Open and Melt was really new around that time, which is not true.
Yeah, I got in a little earlier than you. I'd say I was probably listening. I mean, I started listening in 93, but 2 shows from most likely like 91, I kind of remember a lot of shows from. So, but also, right up until that point, I got to think Melt's the newest song of the songs they played. Yeah, I got to think so.
Well, I have the fact check, so that's my job.
We'll get there.
Check it out. But yeah, this Split Open and Melt starts fairly conventional. Trey's kind of poking around with the band is chasing him in a sense. And my thought is it doesn't exactly go anywhere big, but maybe that's the point of this jam, that they just kind of let it marinate for a long while. And then eventually they bring it back at around 8 minutes.
was pretty solid as a whole. I mean, you're right. It doesn't go all that deep, but it was played fairly well. So, and that goes a long way too.
100%. And that's it. That's the whole set. It's probably just over an hour.
So great.
But it lasts a lifetime.
Absolutely. And there wasn't anything special in the first set or really the third set to take anything away from what happened in that second set. And that's a big part of, how special it was. Like I thought the light in the second set was cool and ended it with a YM and YM, however you say it. I don't know. And then the first set, had a good divided sky, but there wasn't anything really excellent to talk about in either one of the other sets. So I think it had more of an effect on how good the second set was, that there wasn't anything that kind of overshadowed or peaked above anything that happened in that entire second set. So it was perfect.
Well, Scott, thanks so much for being on here to talk about this extra special set that, at least in my memory, will live. If I'm on my deathbed and I forget everything, the names of my loved ones, I hope that I still remember this set and the way it made me feel. And you're a good sport. You're a good man. Thank you so much for being on here to tell us that amazing story of how you ended up there and then just sharing this emotion about it with us.
Thank you once again for having me, Brian. I appreciate it.
And that's it for my interview with Scott Mikita about the JEMP Truck set from December 31st, 2013, the middle set of New Year's Eve. And since we were dealing with so many songs that were played way back from the beginning of the band's career, it is only prudent to do an attendance bias fact check.
Attendance bias fact check.
Scott said that the only show he saw on the fall 2013 tour was in Hartford. That show was on October 27th, 2013. It featured a rock and roll opener in tribute to Lou Reed, who recently passed away. And funny enough, that show has been covered on this podcast with Cully Narramore of Treehouse Brewing. Check out that episode if you want a great breakdown of Phish and some of the best beer in the country. When going over the old school set list of this set, Scott and I guessed which song was the most recently debuted. I guessed Split Open and Melt, and Scott readily agreed, saying it again later in the show. But it turns out that we were both wrong. Split Open and Melt had its live debut on February 17th, 1989 at the Old Stone Church in Newmarket, New Hampshire. Meanwhile, the actual answer to our question is Glide. Glide was the most recently debuted song. While every other song in the set was debuted before 1990, Glide was played relatively late in terms of its live debut, compared to the rest of the set, on September 27th, 1991 at the Warehouse in Rochester, New York. When going over the version of Iculus during this set, I brought up the version from Hartford in 2009, a show that Scott was also in attendance for. That show was on August 14th of that year, and it was in the middle of an insane second set, maybe the best of the year. I recorded a mini episode about that version of Iculus, so after you're done with this one, feel free to scroll back and find it. That episode first aired on December 16th, 2020. And finally, toward the very end of our conversation, I estimated that the JEMP Truck set lasted for just over an hour. I was pretty spot on. The set is 1 hour and 5 minutes. And that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Scott Mikita for joining me today, Phish.net for its help with the fact check, and Phish.in for the recording used in today's episode. If you enjoy Attendance Bias, it would be a huge help if you could support the show by leaving a rating and a review of it on your favorite podcast app. Also, please follow Attendance Bias on social media. I'm usually most active on Instagram and Twitter. Reach out, say hello, and I'll send you a free sticker. Thank you again so much for listening, and I will see you next week on Attendance Bias.